Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order, please. Doug, my understanding is we have two speakers.
Yes, we have two public speakers, the first being Omar Vera.
Good afternoon, MTA Finance Committee. I normally don't speak that much at finance committees because usually they're just like with the important stuff, financial discussions. Not much really is discussed, but I was compelled to come here today because I am really afraid of what's really going to happen with the MTA's finances in the near future. An incompetent man was elected president last week despite losing the popular vote. I'm afraid that any of the policies that he might implement in the near future will result in another deficit the MTA faced, much like the one the MTA faced over half a decade ago, that led to a massive service cuts and a fare hike that was larger than normal. I am really, really afraid of this. That man should not be president. Seriously. If the electors can't pick Hillary Clinton, they should just pick, like I suggest, an actress from this little-known Wave Productions company that makes low-budget movies. Her name is Dawn Murphy. She is not really there anymore, though she used to, but she'll make a much better president than Trump. This is why, I hope the MTA. I really hope, this is my hope, that the MTA still has enough funding by 2020, because I'm really afraid of this. Thank you for letting me speak with this. Have a good day.
Thank you. The next speaker is Murray Bowden.
Morning. I had a presentation, but something came up at the when I was signing up for Bridges and Tunnel that's quite relevant to what's going on here now. When I was signing up, there was a gentleman came up to me and said, "I've been watching you on TV, and I decided to come and speak to transit this morning, and there was a delay on the subways, and I couldn't get here." And so he was disenfranchised because of something that happened, not in his power, but because of what happened at the MTA. And these things do happen. And I started at the first meeting discussing the timing and public speaking. And at the Long Island Railroad, I couldn't speak about what was on the agenda because things were added to the agenda unknowingly. And I wanted to speak on and comment on the Long Island extension. I can't remember, my memory got that. And Mitch correctly gave me a minute to comment on it. And what's needed to be understood, that the inflexibility of that sign out there that was designed for 10 years ago, because I was there too long, we're in an era now of flexibility. We're here not to ventilate like a psychiatrist's office. We're here to discuss information that we think is relevant. We're here to present information that needs to be looked at today, and I have things to talk about the projects that Jim described. I spoke to Joe already about going forward and looking at them and seeing if there were another way to solve the problem. And there needs to be a flexibility when you need to speak to somebody. In the past, many years ago, I needed to speak to some executive, and I called his office, and 20 minutes later I was in his office and discussing what it was about. That was a long time ago. There was flexibility then. We lost it for a while, but we're getting it back again. So I know this was finance, but this just came up, and we need to rethink the flexibility of how we communicate with you, and whether or not to ask me a question, as they do in New Jersey Transit, and solve the problem immediately and not put it out for discussion. The world has changed quite radically while we've been standing here, even having these meetings today. We often think about, how are we going to do it tomorrow?
Thank you, Mr. Bowden.
All right, well, I want to thank both speakers, and since we have no other public speakers, let's move on to the approval of the October 26 minutes. May I please have a motion and a second? All those in favor? Minutes are approved. Doug, can you take us through the work plan?
There are no changes to the work plan.
Next are the budget and capital cycle items.
Thanks. This month, there's no Budget Watch presentation for this month. Mr. Foran will present Wednesday to a joint session of the Finance and full Board, the November financial plan. So next item would be Finance Watch, and Pat McCoy is here for that.
Good afternoon. Finance Watch appears on page 22 of Director's Desk this afternoon. I went through all of these items last month in my presentations, and there have been no changes, so unless there are any questions, that does conclude Finance Watch.
Okay, next we move to MTA headquarter and all agency items. There's one action item seeking to obtain board approval to add the law firm of Loeb and Loeb LLP to the panel of board-approved outside counsel.
Any questions? All right, we need a motion then and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Doug?
Okay. There are two report and information items. The first being the station maintenance receivable update for the period April of 2015 through March of 2016. The total billed was $160.2 million, and all of that has been received. Are there any questions?
Are those based on the number of stations in those municipalities and/or counties, or the usage at those stations?
What it is going way back when, there used to be an annual a billing cycle based upon the actual stations, and there was a very costly and time-consuming effort to continually track that and changes. So it was agreed a number of years ago by all parties that it would make sense to establish a baseline, which goes back a number of years, and from that point just to inflate that, just a cost of living, and that actually became memorialized in practice and in law. So that's the way that's done right now.
Thank you.
Okay. The next information item is the review and assessment of the Finance Committee charter. There are no changes to the charter from the past year. The charter is included on the agenda annually so that members of the Finance Committee can review and assess its adequacy. Any comments on that? That being said, we're going to move to procurements. Angel Barbosa is going to discuss headquarter procurements.
Thank you, Doug. For headquarters, there are 3 competitive procurements for personal services for a grand total of $675,000. These are Art for Transit projects at 3 New York City Transit subway stations on the 4th Avenue line, Prospect Station, Bay Ridge Avenue Station, and the 53rd Street Station. Chairman.
Any questions? Motion and a second? All those in favor? Opposed? Next? Doug?
Next on the agenda, we have Metro North, and there's one action item requesting that the MTA Board approve a modification to the existing agreement with Rockland County to incorporate changes to the unit ticket reimbursement rate, expand Saturday Tappan Zee Express bus service between Rockland County and Metro North's Hudson and Harlem lines in Westchester County, and institute new Sunday Tappan Zee Express bus service.
Any questions? Second? All those in favor?
Now there are Metro North procurements that Angel Barbosa will take us through.
For Metro North, there are 3 procurements for a grand total of $319.2 million. One is a non-competitive sole source procurement for an extension of an existing agreement to purchase 60 additional M8 cars. One is a request for proposal for miscellaneous services for complete overhaul of system redesign, system integration, transport, and warranty of 12 BL20GH locomotives for a total of $15 million. And the last is a modification for additional funding for the acquisition and overhaul of a G35 locomotive. Chairman.
Any questions? Motion? Second? I hear, did someone make a second? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, could I be in the negative on the first one, the rail car? I will not repeat my comments from the Metro North meeting, but I do not believe we should expand in any way alcohol sales, so I'm voting against the procurement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Murdler.
We also have one ratification for board approval to award a contract change order for additional funding under the current miscellaneous service contract with Masabi LLC for a total of $3.37 million.
Motion, any questions? Motion? Second? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay.
For Long Island Railroad, there is one walk-in competitive procurement which you've been handed before the meeting for a request for a proposal for the Long Island Railroad expansion project. The project would add approximately 10 miles of third track along Long Island's main line between Floral Park and Hicksville in Nassau County, New York. Amount to be determined. Chairman.
All those in favor?
New York City Transit MTA bus operations. For New York City Transit and MTA bus operations, there are 5 procurements for a grand total of $198 million. One is a non-competitive procurement for a total of $703,000 for modifications for additional funds for the provision of additional digital information screen systems. 4 competitive procurements for a grand total of $198 million. 3 are requests for proposals, 2 jointly with MTA Capital Construction, and 1 is a retroactive modification to an existing agreement for additional construction support services for the rehabilitation of 9 stations and line structure on the Sea Beach Line, Borough of Brooklyn. Chairman.
Questions? Second? All those in favor?
There are no bridges and tunnels items, and there are no, Chairman,
Okay.
and there are no FEMTAC items.
Doug?
Next is real estate. Jeff Rosen.
Thanks, Doug. We have 3 action items for your consideration this month, each the subject of a staff summary in your books. I'd be glad to take any questions about any of them.
We talk about the Breakneck Ridge one for a moment.
That's on an info item.
Oh, sorry, that's not a real estate item?
No, it is a real estate item, but it's an info item in the book. It's timely.
Sorry?
It's not an action item. It's an info
Okay,
item in the
well-
real estate book, but it's certainly fine.
Let me know when we can talk about it.
By all means. Go.
So Breakneck Ridge is have you spent any time talking to any of the officials in Phillipstown, New York on this topic?
I have not.
So my only concern is this. Breakneck Ridge is and cited by many sources, I don't know who counts it, is the #1 day hike in North America. If you come to Cold Spring, New York on a Saturday or Sunday, it is bedlam up and down Route 9D, with people walking through a 2 to 3 foot section between 50 mile an hour zipping straight away and the shoulder of the road. It's wonderful we do train service there because people come up and down, and in fact I suspect there is more demand for more train service up there, and if you haven't hiked it, it is magnificent. And a lot of people try to hike it with heels, and no, I'm not being funny, and we take someone at least once a month through medevac, sometimes once a week. In the summer it's out of control. And I know it's a big safety issue, particularly as we're working to build this Hudson Fjord that's going to actually create a walkway over the next several years in that area. It's a gorgeous place. Putnam County, and you cite this is in Fishkill, so technically the train station, or the train stop, is in Dutchess, and my colleague from Dutchess is not here today, but the vast majority of the hike is in Putnam, of which I represent. And I am concerned, not that it's not great to have food, because food's great, who doesn't want to have food and hydration on a hike, but having this be even more established as a location, before we have some level of flow control, as I know a big topic for the Phillipstown town supervisor, the Cold Spring mayor, etc. And so I'd love to just have a conversation. I don't know how, this vendor, I can't remember the name, but before I put this person's business on hold, I do believe it'd be valuable for us to engage in a conversation with those of the town of Phillipstown to understand how they feel about this, because I actually think having a truck there will create more of a hazard having people queuing up to buy whatever snacks actually makes me nervous. So I'm not trying to be crazy on safety, as I typically am in other committees, but I'd like us to actually spend a little more diligence on this one, knowing it's a very tiny thing relative to the whole system, but in my little tiny county of Putnam, worthwhile to raise.
No, that's absolutely fine, and when I say that I haven't spoken to anyone, that's not to say that no one from Metro North has, or from my staff. So I don't know if Mark Mannix is here. Otherwise, we'll certainly go slow on this and address any concerns you may have before we enter into it.
I was suggesting going slow. You've also done some wonderful things in the hamlet of Garrison, which I greatly appreciate, related to the Depot Theater, so thank you again. Obviously a tiny topic related to the rest of this board, but we in the tiny county of Putnam appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Beth, does Transit Wireless currently hold any rights to the above-ground stations on the A division of Transit?
No,
No. So this proposal is just for the B division right now?
that's correct. And as we say in the staff summary, it's driven by a desire to expedite the countdown clock project
Yes.
there.
Are we going to get an update on the test that's on the Broadway BMT now? Because I've been watching those, and they seem very accurate. The test countdown clocks on the B division that we're seeing now on the NQR and W lines.
I expect that would happen in transit. Mark Beanstalk is here.
If that's not for today, then fine.
The tests have been very successful. Right now, we're reporting somewhere between 95 to 98% accuracy of the information.
It's a GPS based as opposed to the one that we have on the A.
Not GPS, actually. It's low-energy Bluetooth beacons that are installed on the trains, but it's a similar concept.
Does anybody else have any questions regarding the real estate action items? Not, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now we need a motion for the Finance Committee to adjourn. Have a second? And can I have a motion and a second? Second? All those in favor? Thank you. Chuck, we had to speed up so we can't get back on schedule.